We now move on to the concluding panel discussion on the day, Inclusive and Sustainable CSR Way Forward. I would like to welcome our esteemed moderator and panelists of the session to the dais. Our moderator, Mr. Aziz Fidai, Head CSR Metro Brands Limited, Ms. Aloka Majumdar, Chairperson CSR Committee Bombay Chamber and Managing Director Global Head and Philanthropy and Head of Sustainability India HSBC, Mr. Pradhan, Director Sustainable Business and Communication South Asia Unilever, Ms. Matilda Lobo, Senior Vice President, Head Corporate Social Responsibility IndusInd Bank, and Ms. Prerna Langa, CEO Aga Khan Agency for Habitat India.
Good afternoon, friends, and a very warm welcome to our panel discussion on sustainable and inclusive CSR, a way forward. I would just like to start this discussion on a very positive note. It's that we all who are present in this room, as well as the ones who are attending this summit online, I would just like to say that we are a bit more blessed, we are a bit more lucky, and we are a bit more happier than the other colleagues who are working in our organization. It is just because we have got the opportunity to work for the benefit of the underprivileged as well as the people who have got less opportunities in life, to work for the environment and to work for the mankind on the whole. As such, I would really like to appreciate and applaud the good and the great work which we all are doing in the sphere of CSR. I think so we should give a big round of applause to all of us. So on this positive note, let me start with the first question to, I think so we all know the panel members. We have leaders from HSBC, Aloka, we have Prasad from Unilever, we have Matilda from IndusInd, and we also have Prerna from Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. And these leaders and the organizations in which they are working, they are doing really wonderful job in the spheres of education, health, women empowerment, rural development, water, environment, as well as climate change. So let me ask one question to start the question to Prasad. Prasad, could you elaborate on how exactly you decide on your CSR strategy? What factors and approaches guides your decision in this crucial area?
Hi everyone, loud and clear. Great, so I'll answer it from Hindustan Unilever perspective. We firmly believe that sustainable business drives superior performance. And therefore, for many years, Unilever has been integrating sustainability into its business. So Unilever Sustainable Living Plan was launched in 2010 November, and then 2 years back we launched the Compass. Now Compass is actually the way we drive our business, it's our business strategy. So philanthropic activities and CSR is just one part of it. But if you see the Compass pillars, and there are about 30 priorities in the Compass, and which can be broadly in 3 pillars. The first is actually improving health of the planet. The second is actually improving health, confidence and well-being of people. And the third is really contributing to building more diverse and inclusive world. So ESG really. And these are all multi-year priorities, and some of them expect us to drive really this transformative change. And just give you one example, which is living wage. We've said that by 2030, everyone who works in our value chain will earn a living wage. Now, currently, everyone who works in the company, directly for the company, does earn living wage, but everyone in the value chain, that requires transformative change. Now, having so, Compass really guides us, and CSR activities, obviously, we will focus on Compass largely. However, we are a company, we have 30 factories located mostly our factories are in backward areas of the country. So therefore, actually, the community priorities locally really make a, they are really important. So we integrate it in our strategy. So that's how we launched our Prabhat program, which focuses on water conservation, because agriculture is what most of the people depend on in the rural areas. Skilling agenda, so we've set up about 17 skilling centers in near our factory. And of course, health, hygiene and nutrition related initiatives. So local community needs and the national priorities really are important, and they are actually integrated when we actually frame our CSR strategy. Having said that, sometimes there are aberrations like the COVID times. We had to actually divert funding mainly addressing COVID needs of the community. So that happened, but otherwise, by and large, these are the focus areas, and that's how actually we drive our CSR strategy.
Very nicely explained, Prasad. Actually, the CSR strategy should definitely focus on understanding the specific needs and challenges of the local communities. This helps to create the tailored and impactful initiatives to make a positive difference in the communities in which we all are working. Thanks, Prasad. Matilda. IndusInd Bank stands out as one of the few corporations actively supporting sports. Could you please elaborate on the strategic thinking behind this initiative? Additionally, if you could share some specific success stories or impactful initiatives undertaken by IndusInd Bank to promote inclusion in sports.
At IndusInd, anyways, like other corporates, the CSR evolved organically. For us, I think very critical was sponsorship from senior management. So we have Sanjeev Anand, who is part of the senior management. He himself is a sportsman. And way back, we started Indus for Sports. The whole thought process was that there is a sportsman in each one of us, right? So how does an employee inculcate the traits of a sportsman? Not only in terms of competitiveness, but when you talk about resilience, right? Then respect for competitor. So these are some of the traits that basis which Indus for Sports was started. And when the CSR law, section 7, included sports, it somehow there was an alignment and a marriage of thought process, right? How do we support the aspirations of marginalized communities, of differently abled, of women? Because gender, diversity, and women cuts across all our programs. And that's how, we started supporting sports as an intervention. So just to mention some of them, in the last Tokyo Olympics, out of the overall 21 medal tally for India, 8 medal tally was from athletes that we have been supporting through those sports. We have been supporting line cricket, around 700 athletes, 400 men athletes, and last 1.5 years back, we added 300 women blind athletes. So if you look at it, we are supporting the India blind cricket squad with Cabby. And the impact that we look at is not only in terms of medal tally for India, but the impact, if we look at it, when we started the program way back in 2016, there were only 2,400 blind athletes in the country. Today there are 25,000 blind athletes in the country, right? That is the shift that we are trying to create when you are talking about inclusion. Then when you talk about tribal sports, in Mount Taluka of Satara, we have been supporting girl athletes on tribal sports and traditional sports like Kushti. And there also the girls are really going in the international arena and winning medals for the country. But in addition to that, we are looking at indicators there in terms of
early marriages getting shifted, right? You're seeing where children are continuing with schooling. So these are the larger impact in terms of the type of projects that we are doing in sports. Recently, we have also added 19 girls who will be trained under Ritvik, who is the India World Champion for squash, in again a tribal belt of Maharashtra. So inclusion, when you're talking of differently abled, we talk about inclusion when it comes to gender and woman, girl, child, differently abled, tribals, right? So across the board, and this requires a lot of buy-in from senior management. And I think that's one of the critical aspects for CSR when it comes to defining or refining your CSR strategy.
Really wonderful. Thanks for sharing with us about the IndusInd's support for sports. Your efforts to make the communities more inclusive and empowering through sports is truly inspiring. Keep up the good work, Matilda. Prerna, we know that Aga Khan Agency for Habitat India is a global organization. And in India, you're working on coastal and urban habitat resiliences. Could you please elaborate on the distinctive strategic approach employed by Aga Khan Agency of Habitat for enhancing climate resilience and sustainability, please?
Sure. Firstly, it's great to be here with friends. Nice to see Rohan. We set up Yes Foundation together. So coming to strategy, the strategy we set up for Aga Khan Agency for Habitat is like any other strategy. It's based on a need or a gap. There is a distinct gap in India when it comes to catering to urban India. 34% of India lives in urban areas, and by 2050, 60% will be living in urban areas. From a CSR lens, there is a bias towards rural, and rightfully so in terms of that requires attention, but really what is the quality of life that you and I live in terms of heat to flooding to congestion to air quality. So from that lens, while we work on rural, we work on areas where there is a distinct requirement from a climate perspective, and that is in urban and on the coast, most vulnerable to rising sea levels. India is in a better place compared to the rest of the world. Aga Khan Agency for Habitat works in places like Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tajikistan. So India is really on that growth trajectory. We don't face problems like they face. My counterparts in other countries, they have problems where they could, in Afghanistan, be a target for all kinds of things. In Syria, they don't have electricity or water. So India is in a better place, and really looking at it from the lens of what is India's requirement. That's how we have formulated our India strategy. It's good to have the backing. It's easier being the head of a global organization because then I don't have to think as much because the systems are in place. And luckily, the emphasis is a lot more on impact than visibility. Yeah.
Yes, Prerna, thanks. And the approach to integrate the traditional knowledge with modern techniques, with the participation of community and collaborating with the local stakeholders and government bodies, really ensures the well-being of the communities in the face of environmental challenges. Aloka, the next question to you.
Aloka suspense.
Some very nice question for her. No. What does inclusive CSR mean for you, and what are the challenges?
Okay, no, thank you, Aziz, and it was good to hear all three of you. And this is a very broad question, what is inclusive CSR? And I think through the day today, the half the day, we spoke a lot about reporting and how funding can be made available to non-profits, how CSR strategy should be formed, etc. I think one of the things which I think all three of you highlighted, I think when you say inclusive, it's actually the community. I think we are so much into compliance and so much into, corporate to show that how we are doing great as a corporate, we are forgetting the community. So I think at the core of everything is that we have to get the need of the community there. Only then it's inclusive. I think that's the first one that I would say. The second piece is experts. I think we do see a trend where a lot of people think we understand CSR. I think it's one of the most difficult work to do. And when I say CSR, not so much from the corporate side as much as from the NPO side. So because I've been working with non-profits for a very long time in my life now, and they do one of the most difficult jobs in the country. You have to understand that when you're working with the community, you're working with the vulnerable. The risks are so high, and you can't say that I'm just going to give you education. A flood happens, a drought happens, or a COVID happens. Everything goes, right? So you're working with the most vulnerable. So therefore, I think it's extremely important to work with non-profits who understand, who have the expertise to deal with local communities, because we often think, what are the non-profits doing? They don't know this, they don't know that. But my experience and my team's experience in working in this is that they're the best people. If we are the best in the financing, and as a financial institution, the non-profit who's working at the grassroots level is best in what they're doing there. I think that's another thing that we as CSR professionals, I think that is something that we need to convey to our respective boards and people when we're talking about that. That's the second thing. The third piece is impact. And while I talk about it, it's a very tough thing when we think about impact, right? It's not so easily measurable. It's not so easily to put it in a framework. It's always good to start that journey. But at the end of the day, even in that, I think it's extremely important to get the person who's delivering it on ground to get their input. So today, when I put a lot of stress on monitoring and evaluation, and Prasad and we work very closely on this, we think more not from a top-down approach. It has to be a bottom-up approach, because the fact is the person who is dealing at the grassroots level understands the risks, understands the community, understands what are the imperatives. So I think it's extremely important that when we are talking about reporting in this space, we don't become auditors. I think inclusive would mean that you work with bottom-up approach, you work with your partners to then build. Sandeep was speaking here, and we work very closely with Sandeep in KPMG and as well Della. One of the things we said, when you work with our partners, ask them. You can't have a monitoring and reporting format. It doesn't work like that. Even I sitting in a boardroom saying, this is how I want the thing, it doesn't work like that. You have to, because you are doing it at the bottom of the pyramid, you will be able to tell us that this is how it works. They bring in their expertise to put a structure together. I think that's something which is important for us, and that's how we see as the inclusive piece. And the last thing I'll just say, Aziz, in terms of you asked me about what inclusive means for us, impact, monitoring, capacity building, and the ones that I mentioned. If you ask me challenges, I would say that there is a lot of pressure on compliance. Which is one way can work really well for us if we make it work for us. Yes. I think that's going to be the very important piece. And I think the other big piece is, while I head sustainability for HSBC, and like Prasad mentioned, we are part of the sustainability function. CSR is one part of the job that we do. A focus on net zero, focus on climate is a reality, but we don't forget equity. The point is, I think the conversation that's happening is, and that's something, perhaps it's a bit of East versus West. West is a lot about, their priorities are very different from ours, but in India, we cannot forget equity. If we do that, I think we are going to head for a very, very difficult times, and that's something that we as CSR professionals have to challenge. I think I've spoken a lot, so sorry.
Thanks, Aloka, for giving a very clear-cut perspective on inclusivity and certifying that the non-profit sector is the toughest sector to work, even tougher than the corporates. So thanks for giving us your perspective. Prasad, CSR projects do create some good impact. Will you help our audience with some ways and means to make bigger impacts through CSR projects?
Yeah, it's really speed and scale. And when I say speed and scale, in the earlier panel they talked about collaboration. I'll dwell a bit on collaboration and some great efforts through collaboration, because you can really achieve scale through collaboration. So let me give you one example where Aloka and us work together, which is Suvidha centers. So 4 or 5 years back, we used to run a lot of hygiene and sanitation program in the rural areas. But there weren't any programs in the cities really. And it was actually obviously difficult to run a program in cities like Mumbai. By the way, 40% of Mumbaikars live in slum even today. 90% of them rely on community toilets. 80% of them do not have 24-hour electricity and running water. And many of them actually buy water for their household use even today. Now, clearly, hygiene center was a need, and if you can actually have, toilets, bathing facilities, safe drinking water, and then we said laundry facility, and if we can actually use water, reuse water, considering that water will be stressed in the years to come, that was the idea. And it took us almost 1 year to convince government to give us some old toilet which can be converted into a Suvidha center, we called it. We went really from pillar to post, but after the first center was set up in Ghatkopar, believe me, the property prices in that slum went up, and relatives from their native places used to come, and people used to show them the Suvidha center. And that's when actually, me and Aloka, we met accidentally at the airport and we started talking about it. And by the time we were going for the same conference, and by the time we boarded the flight, we had decided that we will collaborate. She said, we will collaborate. And then we were meeting Government of Maharashtra, one of the senior secretaries in the FICCI conference. And we went there and we told her that we're going to collaborate. We set up the first center, but for the next 5, we're planning to collaborate. Aloka went back, and hats off to her. Within next 1 month, we got that clearance from HSBC. And next 4 years, we set up 7 centers. And now there are 14 centers with HSBC and HUL. Whether in Dharavi, whether in Ghatkopar, whether in Malavani. And these centers are actually, obviously then now these centers are taken note by the BMC, so corporators and other people, senior politicians have visited. Not only that, 20 US senators went there. BMC has taken it on their agenda for transforming Mumbai. They want us to build 200 such centers in Mumbai. They said, don't worry about money, don't worry about land, just build this center. So that's really a great example of collaboration. And once you get the model right, and by the way, the biggest plus point of Suvidha Center is within 9 months, it becomes self-sustainable. So I feel actually through CSR projects, you are developing a project which becomes self-sustainable in 9 to 10 months time, and it can run on its own, provide jobs to the local community. And you need to build models like these through collaboration and thereby achieve scale.
Excellent work. Actually, working closely with the local communities, government bodies and other partners really help us to scale our projects. Moreover, the focus on educating and empowering the local communities ensures that our efforts are sustainable in the long run. But in the context of sustainable CSR, how does IndusInd Bank ensure longevity and scalability of its program while continuing to support and empower diverse groups within the society?
So one is that when you look at the CSR law, it talks about 1 plus 3 years, right? But in 1 plus 3 years, you really cannot have a long-term transformation. Like when we're talking about simple things like sports, if you want laurels for the country or to get an Olympic medal, you'll have to put 15 years of hard work to support, that particular athlete. At the same time, when you're talking about the community, which is again as per our strategy, the community is at the core. Then we're looking at long-term interventions as part of our strategy. We're looking at convergence with government, right? You align with what is the government priority in the country. Plus, what is very important, there are so many schemes which are there, right? And the community needs to take benefit of it, either through direct to bank transfers or through various schemes where they get either housing or a tractor, etc. So that is again sustainable in terms of, immediate cash in the community's bank account. So we basically then also talk about collaboration, where we collaborate with Hak Darshak, then Catalyst, for social protection. Then other aspect that we're looking at is that when you're looking at long-term sustainable projects, it's very key that you have a detailed baseline, right? You have a need assessment which is coming from the community. You ensure that you work with NGOs who have the credibility, who have the connect with the community, who have good equity with the district administration, with the state government and the center, right? So when you're working with this type of organizations, you are working in terms of a long-term perspective and working on systemic approach of solving the social problem. And that's again where sustainability comes in. Other aspect where sustainability comes in is that your organization per se, are you looking at building your CSR team? Are you building at strengthening your CSR team? Are you trying to get expertise in your CSR team? At the same time, working on the organizational development need of the NPOs on the NGOs. Because till the time you don't build capacity at the NGO level, you will just be working at a project mode, not in terms of a programmatic approach. So that is another aspect that we ensure as part of, moving from a project mode to a programmatic mode. We support the NGOs on all organizational need which is there in terms of capacity building. Other is that, are you ready to take risk? Where we're talking about collaboration, we were the first organization to do a development impact bond with CSR investment. How do you do it? That's why I say CSR investment. How do you do it within compliance, right? Ensuring that annually that amount is being spent. Here we ensured that through a development impact bond, pay for outcome model, we had Central Square Foundation, social finance, we had implementing partner, and we were able to reach a larger number of grade 1 and grade 2 students. We were able to impact with the same CSR investments, stretch the social ROI and reach close to 1,27,000 children, right? And what is very important in terms of sustainability is that, one is that you have created a pricing mechanism for this type of models. Secondly, that particular model fed into the Nipun Bharat and the Nipun Haryana of the government initiative. Other aspect is that the Haryana government basically picked up the model and now is replicating the model in the 21 districts of Haryana. So that's how we look at sustainability in terms of convergence with government and collaborative action.
Thanks, Matilda, for sharing these inspiring examples and insights. It's evident that IndusInd Bank's commitment to sustainable CSR not only transforms lives today, but also lays the foundation for a better tomorrow. Here, I would also like to just add one example of what Metro Brands is doing in sustainability. As we all know, Metro Brands is a footwear retailer. And we also know that footwear is very difficult to decompose naturally when disposed of, when discarded. And it remains in the landfills and oceans for hundreds of years, thereby harming the environment. It is just because of change in constant fashions, the change in constant raw materials, there is an overconsumption. And overconsumption leads to overproduction. And overproduction leads to overwastage. For the strong population of around 8 billion people worldwide, the footwear industry manufactures somewhere around 20 billion pairs of footwear on an annual basis. Now this 20 billion pair of footwears, it just goes to the landfills and oceans. So actually what have we done? In the year 21-22, we ran a small pilot project of processing the old discarded footwear in an eco-friendly manner. And we achieved around 5% of coverage. In the year 22-23, we sold around 7.8 million pairs of footwear and we processed around 2.1 million pairs of footwears, So the coverage that we achieved was around 25%. In the current year, we are expecting to achieve the coverage of around 50%. And in the year 24-25, we have taken an ambitious target of achieving pair-to-pair. That is, the number of footwear pairs that would be selling would be equal to the number of footwear pairs that will be processing in an eco-friendly manner. So this is how we have made a cradle to grave journey of our footwear in an eco-friendly manner. So Prerna, would you share some insight into Aga Khan Agency of Habitat's collaboration with corporates and CSRs, particularly in the ESG and net zero domain, and the impact of these partnerships on sustainability and climatic action initiatives?
Thanks. So firstly, I would congratulate Prasad and Aloka on Subhida. I think it's fabulous. And it's like amazing, and I think it happened because it's both of you who have led it. So on collaboration, I feel somehow there's no incentive, within organizations for collaboration. While I was at ICICI Foundation, we set up a collaboration initiative called Bhavishya Alliance to bring down, malnutrition. And we were a consortium with a bank, it was a consortium. And while, of course, my boss was Nachiket Moore, so we had a very enlightened way thanks to his, vision. But I can't tell you how difficult it was because there was no incentive for the participating companies to collaborate. They were not getting any brownie points. Instead, they were more focused on, I have this target and how do we go about it. So I feel we need to create some kind of incentive or some kind of structures because, of course, we can't depend only on enlightened leadership when it comes to collaboration, where there is a win-win. So coming to Aga Khan and the way we work is, like I said, we identify a need, and luckily, being a non-profit, the need is identified from on the ground. So we know that when it comes from a funder's lens, we need to de-risk a funder. So to establish a particular model, because there's a high chance it could fail, we get some bit of funding from our global office. So on this coastal resilience model, we got funding. We started with Porbandar and we piloted on our own to see whether it works. And then we've now got, so it's really important that place year after year, they have storm surges, they have cyclones, and the same things happen, there's destruction. So really working in the community to build community resilience from the point of mapping to using technical assessments, and then also working on biodiversity, and not only mangroves, but mangroves plus IoT. And then we got Ericsson on board, and now we are covering the coast, HDFC Bank, LTI Mindtree, etc., etc. So that's the way we work in terms of partnerships. And in all our partnerships, government is involved because the land comes from the government, permissions come from the government. So very happy to be working with Hindustan Unilever on the Prabhat program in Gujarat. So that's the way we approach partnerships. Yeah.
Again, really fantastic. Aga Khan Agency for Habitat is really doing some good work. And the last question of this session to Aloka, as a multinational with presence across many countries, how do you see CSR or corporate philanthropy evolving now?
Okay, so it's in very interesting times, like I mentioned. I think climate is taking the center stage everywhere. I think people have already. I think in the earlier sessions we were very clear that where is it moving, and everybody was talking about net zero, etc. So I think that's, if you take the global discourse is completely on the climate piece and the net zero piece. So that's where it is. The second piece, I think I can reiterating, but CSR, from an ad hoc or an independent activity to being integrated to ESG is bound to happen. It's going to happen. We already have the BRSR reporting here in India. In several places across the world, you see a lot of reporting pressure, so therefore it's going to be more integrated in what the companies are doing. As far as net zero is concerned, I think the biggest challenge that's what we see evolving is actually, again, what I mentioned was between the East and the West. Because the fact is this net zero piece is very different in the western part of the world and the eastern part of the world. I mean, if you see Asia Pacific and the rest of it, so it's very, very different. So, but having said so, I think to work on a very common agenda where we put, like I mentioned, equity at the center will be perhaps the biggest challenge for us. The second is, I think in one of the earlier presentations we mentioned that there is, when you talk about net zero, etc., data is a big issue. The point is, everybody is now, in this thing of making commitments. We've also made commitments, very large commitments you may have seen for HSBC. But the thing is, as soon as you make a commitment, to measure is going to become that much more difficult. Also, difference between social and environment, I think if it gets merged, is going to be quite difficult because a lot of the sustainability agenda is being driven by business. So while we all talk about business strategies aligned to your CSR strategy, the thing is that I often use this word internally with the team, we say the missing S. We basically say, you're talking about everything, but when you're not talking about social, and that's something we cannot lose. I think that's the conversation that I think this conversation has started even in the West and, as a multinational company when we see. So I think these are some of the trends that we are going to see in the coming days. There will be a huge pressure on reporting. I think there is a separate session on reporting altogether. But this is going to be I think from, Vanita, what you mentioned, what Hina mentioned, I think we will need professionals who understand this sector because this is an evolving sector. So therefore, we also see the new professionals are coming up in this sector. So the new jobs are being created in the sector as well. That is another thing that we see. And this is going to be a journey. But your next 10 years, if you ask me, I see climate and net zero taking the center stage when it comes to CSR.
Is happy. So thanks Alok for sharing this interesting perspective. And now let us open this forum for questions, if at all we have, for the panelists.
Sometimes you have to think because when your line manager is in a panel, you don't know whether you would want to ask a question. Gomit, same from HSBC. So, but
the rating isn't problem.
Yeah, but I have two questions and maybe one reflection. So one is, so we spoke of inclusion, and in all the submissions that we heard about social inclusion. My point is on geographical inclusion because we certainly in terms of the presentation that we saw, in terms of this, the less investment, say, on eastern or northeastern, while we know that companies have to invest in areas that they are located. So what is the reflection on the panel on how do we increase the geographical inclusion bit? Second question is maybe more directed to Prerna because, you spoke of, government and you took the example of urban. So, as a general, like a ballpark figure is that 90 to 92% of development sector finance is still public sector. You spoke of urban. Mahua's annual budget for this year is 54,000 crores. So in a space where, public sector investment on development finance is still very large, how do you see organizations like, CSR and not-for-profit, what areas do they intervene so that you complement public and private sector finance?
You want to go first? Okay. Yeah, so when it comes to the urban landscape, as you rightly said, there is government investment. But it's the same even with the rural landscape. What is the role that CSR can play or non-profits can play is innovation and also demo, like, proof of concept. So it's not only about government spending, but bringing in that technical expertise. For example, we are working right now in Mira Bhainder. Okay. So they have money and we have also partnered with, we are aware that they have the money. But how do we demonstrate? A lot of people talk about climate, net zero, etc. But how that implementation is important for the demo. So there we are working where we have architects, we have construction people, etc. to see as to how we can create cooling solutions for the rising heat. So right from working on smart streets where there is access to working on green buildings, strengthening housing societies, because if you don't have a strong housing society, even if you want to build green, you want to do anything for your building, nothing will happen. And that's where it starts. So right from solar to rainwater harvesting, you need your housing society. So looking at all these elements that government could possibly not look at, more the social fabric or the community lens of climate is where we come in. And that's where CSR can come in also. What they have done, with Suvidha, government has a huge budget on toilets. But what they have done is really unique. So that's what CSR and non-profits can do.
On the first question about geographical, yes, historically you've seen that, Maharashtra, which is a financial capital or where most of the corporates are based out of, will obviously, get more allocation of CSR fund. But that is changing in the last couple of years. Even organizations like banks, we are agnostic, we don't have a plant in terms of location or geographical preferences. So we as an organization, and we are seeing even Tata Steel, NSC Foundation, many organizations now aligning with government priorities of aspirational districts. So first there was aspirational district, 112 aspirational district, and now there are 500 aspirational blocks that have been identified as backward districts and block in India, basis on multiple indicators. So we as an organization again are focusing on 5 aspirational districts over a period of 5 years. And we are talking about UP, Bahraich, Bihar, Begusarai, Bara and Rajasthan. So these are actually beyond the fence. So yes, it is it's slowly moving towards that. But at the same time, just to add, CSR cannot solve all problems, right? So you find everybody from research organizations to climate collaboratives, everybody reaching out for CSR fund. I think it's again, it's very important in terms of the ecosystem where private investment has to come in equally towards social good, right? And that is possible if we have different models of blended finance and different innovative models which are come into play. Again, social stock exchange is one other platform which can build in that equity and reach in terms of even geographical preferences. So just a statement that today we have everybody thinking that CSR can solve, and it's still a very small portion of the overall funding. So we need, multi-stakeholder partnership to really reach, in terms of where there's actually a need, in terms of social problems and solutioning.
Do you want to add? Oh, I think it's
There's one more question. My question is to Aloka in context to what has been said just now. If we see that the allocation is, though the numbers are big, but they are in the context, they are not so big. You mentioned something about equity. Can you elaborate in terms of, how do you, because getting there is a challenging, so how do you explain that?
Yeah. So two things. When I spoke about equity, that is two things. One is, including the base of the pyramid, even when a climate program. My thing was, when we are talking about climate, we are often not looking at the population which is at the base of the pyramid, right? But while they are actually facing they're the biggest, if you ask me, the negative consequences of climate change they're facing in the worst manner. So from that lens, I said that most of the programs that we hear on climate change today, so if you talk the currently some of these terms which are very important to us and also many other corporates, you hear a lot about energy transition, right? You hear a lot about nature-based solutions. These are terms being used. These are of course two big focus areas for us globally. But what we want to do is, when you're working on a program like that, you have to look at it from the lens of the poor. you don't exclude the poor, because if you try and do that, then what will happen is the funding will move towards your research and other activities, whereas people lose that touch with the ground level where we need to do. That's one. From in terms of reaching out to various geographies, I think Matilda already mentioned, it's typically, I think after the CSR law came into being, everybody thought that you're supposed to do it in the geography where you're present. And I think that's where I think there was a lot of confusion around it, and all companies started focusing on there. We as an organization, we actually took a risk, because we read it in a different way, because we've had a lot of, and we actually went and to the places across the country. In fact, we did a study in terms of whether we have projects where we have presence, and we realized we have very few projects where we have presence, because we're a foreign bank. So I think that's what Matilda is saying is, this thing is coming up because the government is also pushing the fact that you go to where it is required, rather than just doing it because you have presence there. I think that narrative has, at least that this dialogue has started, and we do feel that it's going to be, but I still think to achieve equity, if you ask me from a geographical perspective, it's going to be a challenge, because every organization, they're more comfortable to do a project where they have presence, because they're not comfortable. For example, if you see the northeastern states, it requires a huge amount of funding, but today, if you ask me, you'll see very, very little, and very few companies who are taking the risk of going and investing there. So the point is, this is going to take time, but I think it can also be one, I'm just hypothetical, but if you have some states like Maharashtra getting more funding, the center should then have that leverage of saying Maharashtra gets less, and you divert that fund to say the northeast. But to answer your question, I really don't have a very clear answer. Geographical equity is going to be a big challenge for in the CSR space, is what we believe. Yes.
Actually, in the earlier session and even now, we talked a lot about collaboration and then geographical presence, etc. There was a great program in government of Maharashtra when Devendra Fadnavis was the chief minister. They had this village transformation mission, and they had brought together about 8 or 10 leading corporates, and chief minister himself used to chair VSTF. And they had, basically, we wanted to transform about 500 most underdeveloped villages in Maharashtra. And that process started with actually the engagement and consultation in terms of how do we define this. And then we zeroed in on actually 6 KPIs, 6 parameters on which actually we can say the village has made an improvement, and which had health and hygiene, which had sanitation, which had education, which had infrastructure, water, so on and so forth. And then what would be the KPIs? And by the way, all the leading experts used to be there, and Chief Minister's Secretary used to be present and take part actively in that session. And that's how KPIs were actually identified. And then he said that actually his philosophy was actually government is not short of funds. Government has lots of funds. Even we see today for Suvidha Center, there is no issue of funds. But it is only that actually they need the corporate's rigor to actually drive those funds in the right direction. And then he had the vision to really say that, we will actually put the, management trainees who want to do the internship in the villages, etc., to really actually monitor progress and work with the district collectors. And that's how those progress on those KPIs were monitored. Now, unfortunately, our political system is such that actually that project was great. It should have lasted much longer. It's still there. But such projects need to be followed up with great rigor.
We are still having questions. Can we take it?
One or two. You can add and
So Prasad, I'm very happy to share that being invited for the revival of VST today at 3 o'clock. And so incidentally. Question to all the panelists. A lot has been spoken about climate change, energy transition, natural solutions. But water, which is a core to life and sustainability, has been clearly missing the narrative. No, you all are doing it, but the narrative. Even at G20 and even the COP28, which is coming in Abu Dhabi right now, Water is just one of the subsets. Why is this, and what do you think we can do to align water equal importance as much as climate?
I agree with him. I agree with you. Because we as an organization, we invested in water for a very long time, for about 12 years. Because anything on climate, you cannot do short-term investment. It has to be a minimum of 5, it can go up to 10 to 12 years, that's what. Now, I think that globally the discourse, why for India water is very, very important, and for some of the countries in this part of the world. But globally we are saying that the focus is actually moving from water. It's actually moved. It was there. We see it moving towards more renewables. It's because everybody's talking about net zero, but I think what will happen is nature will bring water back. That's what I think the conversation what we are seeing is just a terminology if you ask me. So what we used to call water earlier is now going to be part of your nature-based solutions.
The Jal Shakti Ministry will launch a program called as the Water to drive villages and industry to go on to water policy and ZLD along with net zero.
One last question.
Okay. My name is Devdatta Deshpande and I am representing the Pride India. My question is to all the panelists. See, we keep hearing of the words such as impact, assessments, outcomes, sustainability, and we write everything in the proposal, 10, 12 pages proposal, and then we straight away move to 3+1 formula. 4 साल में आपको खत्म करना है. See, we work in a very complex society. We have had Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar, who gave their entire life for reforms, and they were still not completely successful. And we are supposed to do that in 3+1 year, have decent reports, have 5% of admin, and that's all. So is there any way around this 3+1? Because it's almost impossible. And to make it sustainable, we write it as a footnote in all the proposals. We are all guilty of doing that just to get money. But is there any way to get around that, to put some sense in government with corporates? I mean, how do you do that? It's just not possible.
I feel actually you are absolutely right, and we fully appreciate where you come from. However, the way I see it is actually I want my proposals to be long term. So even if you don't achieve certain KPIs that were set, it's fine. I mean, as long as you are on the right track, I will encourage you to go on, because that's really and in fact some of the program, for example, I mean again I'm coming back to Suvidha Center again and again, but let me give again the same example. Suvidha Center would not have come up because first 2 years we just spent, and that those KPIs were never met. Similarly, the plastic, collection that we are doing currently and innovative, sustainable projects that we are trying to build. Just like Suvidha Center, we want to build sustainable model whereby plastic will never be on the street. Just like newspaper, we will not find on the street. If there is a value created out of it, it will work. We will create that social enterprise around it. Now, to build this model, it has lot of learning has gone in, and it's impossible to really do it in three years time. It will take longer time, but you can be actually rest assured that corporates are committed to this agenda, and we will drive it to the logical conclusion. And earlier somebody mentioned that actually the two circles, which is business and philanthropy, they are actually coming closer, and they will not be far when they will completely overlap. So society will not give license for companies to operate without actually contributing to society in a meaningful way.
Only just to add to what Prasad has mentioned, this has been taken up also with MCA, talking about 1+3 years is a very short term for long-term sustainable projects. But having said that, there was a different perspective saying that, let's try to solve the problem, okay? Because otherwise, you just continue with that problem in terms of long term. Like what you mentioned, Suvidha, you have multiple stakeholders coming, multiple actors, and trying to actually put a pathway or a roadmap in trying to solve that problem. If the problem still persists or requires further funding, the corporate is open at looking at it and is invested in terms of a long-term project in solving that problem. So that is not a constant, because your 1+3 year project is over. You have a new projects that you can start for the second leg or the second phase of that particular intervention that we are doing. So I don't see that coming as a constraint, saying that we can't solve the problem in 1+3 years and the project just stopped. I don't think so any one of us would want to end an investment like that.
Thank you all the panelists and moderator. Yeah. Yes. So we have, yeah, please sir, you can give a concluding remark. Yeah, please sir. Yeah, close.
Actually, when I was with Axis Bank Foundation, so at that time we funded the projects and the funds were going on till 10 years, 12 years also. The thing was that, the annual renewal was there, and after 5 years, the fresh budgets were called for and all this stuff. So the corporates are really funding. If at all the project has some sense in it, and if at all the impact is there, the corporates are really supporting it.
Thank you, sir.
It's yours.
Thank you so much. So we will have time during the lunch time to discuss with each other all the things. So now I request Sandeep Khosla, Director General, Bombay Chamber, to present a memento as a token of appreciation to the speakers. To Prerna. To Matilda Lobo. Mr. Pradhan. Ms. Aluka Majumdar. And Mr. Aziz Fidai. I request all the panelists to join for a group photograph. Thank you. I request Mr. Sandeep Khosla to deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you, and I think Anya is feeling very hungry, so she was trying to, on behalf of all of you. So, first of all, my apologies that we are running behind by almost half an hour, but I'm not going to take much time, just a couple of minutes, and invite all of you to join us for lunch. First of all, thank you for coming here, and I think this was a very, very interesting session. We'll also put this up on our website, so in case anyone wants any further details, you all can look at our website. My thanks to all our sponsors, DBS Bank, HSBC and Unilever, without whom this wouldn't have been possible. Very shortly, we have a sustainability conclave around, I think, on 14th of December, which we plan to do it at an outside venue, because I think the kind of interest which is there, we will not be able to accommodate everyone in this hall. And as sustainability is a full year program for most of us, we might just do it in 4 seasons. With that, thank you to all for all our panelists, all our speakers. I think sustainability is one of the biggest challenges right now. I don't know how many of you have read today's paper says that yesterday the most polluted part of Mumbai was Colaba. Now I don't think anyone would have even imagined that Colaba of all the places would be the most polluted, but that's what's happening. Regarding plastic, I just heard someone, I was in Kodaikanal last month, and that's one city which has got zero plastic. I had a water bottle in my hand. The moment I went there, somebody very politely took it and gave me a glass bottle. So, and if you still go in various markets in Mumbai, especially the fish markets, you still have plastic bags which are available. So, it's for all of us. We can do as many conferences and as many seminars as possible, but you can still see water bottles here. We still take time for that. But with that, please join us. Thanks to Anya for so beautifully doing this, and our chairperson of our CSR committee, Aloka, for completely driving this. So thank you all once again, and please join us for lunch.